My name's Andrew, I'm 32, and I'll tell you about this morning that started out just like any other day, but ended up being the beginning of something I'll probably never forget. I was standing on my porch, mug of coffee in one hand, cigarette in the other, watching the sunrise like I usually do before work. My little ritual. The air was crisp, with that kind of fall chill that's just enough to wake you up without making you want to crawl back inside. I live in this quiet neighborhood where nothing much happens, and to be honest, I'm used to the silence. The same people doing the same morning routines, the sounds of garage doors rolling up, and the distant hum of cars heading to work, it's all part of my usual morning. But today, there was a new sound. The low rumble of a truck engine rolling up the street and coming to a stop at the house next to mine. That place had been empty for what felt like forever, so seeing a moving truck pull up piqued my interest right away. I took a long drag of my cigarette and watched as a couple of guys hopped out, ready to unload. They'd pulled out boxes, furniture wrapped in blankets, and that kind of stuff, filling the driveway with a mix of the new and the familiar. Couches, chairs, stacks of cardboard boxes with scrawled Sharpie labels. It was the telltale chaos of someone starting fresh in a new place. I squinted, trying to catch sight of who the new neighbor might be, but there was no clear sign. Not yet, anyway. I've always been a social guy, the kind who waves hello and strikes up conversations over fences. I'd helped my fair share of folks move in or out, so naturally, I was already planning an excuse to drop by and introduce myself. Who knows? Maybe this new guy would turn out to be someone I could actually hang out with, or at least not a nuisance. But for now, all I had were the movers, huffing and puffing as they wrestled a couch through the front door. The day passed with the usual grind, the kind of weekday that's more muscle memory than anything else. Work, a lunch break spent half scrolling through my phone, more work, and then the long-awaited drive back home through traffic. By the time I got home, the truck was gone, but I saw a few lights on inside the house next door. It was official, I had a new neighbor. I felt a weird jolt of anticipation. Maybe I was just bored with the same old routine, but the idea of meeting someone new had me kind of excited. It wasn't until later that evening, when the sun was down and the street had gone quiet, that I got my first surprise. I was lounging on my couch, feet up, catching up on a show, when there was a knock on the door. It was late, definitely not the time I expected anyone to drop by. For a second, I wondered if it could be an Amazon delivery I'd forgotten about, or worse, some kind of emergency. I got up, my heart picking up a notch, and walked over to the door, half expecting to see nothing but the empty front step. But there he was. A tall, well-built guy, probably around 30, standing there under the porch light with an apologetic smile. He was striking in a way that's hard to put into words right away. His skin was a rich, deep brown, his eyes were sharp and kind of intense, and he carried himself with that easy confidence that makes you pay attention. He looked good, like really good, dressed casually but neatly, which made the whole unexpected visit even more interesting. It clicked immediately. This had to be the new neighbor. He gave a small wave, clearly feeling the awkwardness of showing up unannounced, and explained that he was here to introduce himself, but also to ask a favor. Turns out, the water in his place hadn't been turned on yet. I don't know if it was some issue with the city or just the usual moving day chaos, but he was in a spot. He needed a shower, and it was either knocking on my door or staying uncomfortable until morning. For a second, I hesitated. It's not every day someone you've never met shows up asking to use your bathroom. My mind flashed back to this one time when I was younger and in a similar situation, needing a favor from a neighbor, and I figured, why not? Different situations happen, and we're all just trying to make it through them with a bit of grace. So I nodded, stepped aside, and let him in. It felt like a gamble, but there was something about the way he held himself, respectful, confident, not pushy, that made me feel like I wasn't making a mistake. It's funny how those quick, gut-level decisions happen sometimes. You're just doing your thing 1 minute, and the next, you're letting a complete stranger into your house because, somehow, it feels right. I led him inside, taking in the sight of him as he walked past me and into my hallway. The guy was even more striking up close. Tall and muscular in a way that wasn't just for show, This wasn't gym bro muscle, but the kind that looked natural, like he played sports or worked with his hands. His clothes fit him well, a simple tee stretched just enough over his chest and shoulders, and jeans that somehow managed to look both casual and sharp. The kind of effortless style that made me feel suddenly aware of my worn-out sweats and old t-shirt. I wasn't embarrassed exactly, but I definitely felt a bit underdressed. And the main part, I was literally shocked by his dignity, if you get what I'm talking about. I showed him to the bathroom, giving a quick tour as we passed through the house. It was a little surreal, having this stranger in my space. The hallway felt smaller, the air a bit thicker. Maybe it was just the late hour or the novelty of the situation, but there was this underlying current I couldn't shake. I chalked it up to being tired and left him with a spare towel and an apologetic mention about the shower pressure, which wasn't exactly stellar. He thanked me with a nod that somehow felt more genuine than words. I stepped back into the living room, trying to go back to my show, but my mind was somewhere else. I heard the faint sounds of the water starting up and realized I was more aware of it than I should be. It wasn't just background noise. It was a reminder that he was in there, in my space, and there was something about that I couldn't ignore. I felt restless, like I was waiting for something to happen even though I had no idea what that could be. When I looked up again, it was at the sound of the water stopping. My mind raced ahead to what he might look like stepping out, droplets clinging to that dark skin, muscles tensed from the chill of the air. I shook my head, annoyed at myself. I hadn't felt that kind of raw attraction in a while, especially not so suddenly. But there it was, pulsing beneath the surface, completely unexpected and impossible to deny. The bathroom door opened, and he stepped out, towel wrapped loosely around his waist, skin glistening in the low light. My breath caught before I could stop it. He was beautiful in that unassuming way, like he didn't even know the effect he had. His chest was broad, tapering down to a set of abs that looked carved by hand, and his arms, those arms could hold you down without effort. What really caught my eye, though, was the natural ease in how he moved, as if he belonged there. He looked around the hallway for a moment before spotting me in the living room. That split second when our eyes met was electric. It wasn't just attraction, there was an unspoken understanding, an acknowledgement of the moment. He didn't try to cover up more or act embarrassed. Instead, he gave me this small smile, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I should have looked away, should have offered him some spare clothes, or done anything to break the tension that was now hanging heavy between us. But I didn't. I just stood there, caught in this silent tug-of-war. The room felt smaller now, the air charged. I found myself taking in every detail, the droplets of water sliding down his neck, the way his chest rose and fell, how even the simplest movement seemed to command attention. He turned slightly, reaching for his bag that he must have brought over without me noticing, and that's when it happened. The towel slipped a bit, just enough to make me swallow hard. I wasn't trying to stare, but my eyes had a mind of their own, drawn to the way the fabric shifted against him. What really got me was when he bent down slightly to grab his pants. It was a move that should have been routine, mundane, but there was nothing ordinary about it in that moment. He was in just his underwear now, and it was impossible not to notice how well they fit him, outlining the kind of body that made your thoughts scramble. I felt the heat rising, the kind that starts at the back of your neck and rushes forward before you even realize what's happening. I felt like my breath was punched right out of me. It was one thing to picture him in the shower, steam curling around those broad shoulders and dark curls, but seeing him standing there, right in front of me, was something else entirely. The way the light hit him, casting shadows that traced every line and dip of muscle, made my heart thud in a way I hadn't felt in years. He caught my eye and didn't look away, that slight, knowing smile still playing at the corners of his lips. It felt like a test of sorts, one I wasn't sure I could pass without crossing a line. But the air between us was heavy, charged with a silent challenge, and I could tell we were both waiting for someone to make the next move. I was on the edge, standing at the line between playing it safe and stepping into something unknown. The latter felt dangerously tempting. I watched as he turned back to his bag, bent slightly to grab his clothes, and that's when the towel shifted, revealing more of him than I'd expected to see. I should have been embarrassed at how openly I stared, but the pull was too strong. There was this moment, frozen in time, where I could hear nothing but the pounding of my heart and the soft rustle of fabric as he moved. It was a mix of boldness and that small voice of reason telling me I should take a step back, act like nothing was happening. But that voice was faint, drowned out by the pulse of something deeper. The towel loosened further, and before I could even think about what I was doing, I moved closer, standing just behind him. I could see the definition of his back, the way his muscles flexed supply under the skin. The heat coming off him was palpable, and I found myself reaching out, hesitant but drawn by an impulse I hadn't felt in a long time. My hand brushed against his arm, fingers barely touching, but even that small contact was enough to ignite something between us. I held my breath, waiting for some sign, some reaction that would tell me if I'd made a mistake. But instead of stepping away, he stilled, his body relaxing under my touch as if inviting more. That unspoken permission was all I needed. I moved closer until there was no space left between us. I felt the heat of him seep into me, the dampness of his skin against my clothes. His scent was overwhelming. A mix of soap, skin, and something inherently him, and it sent a shiver through me. I leaned into him, pressing my body against his back, feeling the solidness of him. The room seemed to shrink. The only thing I could focus on was the rhythm of our breathing, how it fell into sync as I wrapped my arms around him. I could feel the tension in his muscles, not from discomfort but from something else, something electric that was building between us. His hand reached down and touched mine, pressing it against his chest in a way that made my head spin. I could feel his heart pounding just as fast as mine, and that shared realization that we were both caught in this moment, wanting the same thing, sent a thrill through me. He turned slightly, just enough for me to catch the side of his face, his eyes dark and searching. The room was quiet except for our breathing and the soft hum of night settling in outside. I traced the line of his jaw, feeling the roughness of stubble under my fingertips, and the warmth of his skin made it impossible to think clearly. He leaned into my touch, eyes closing for a moment as if savoring it, and when he opened them again, they were full of something I couldn't quite name but knew I wanted to explore. Before I could second-guess myself, I tilted my head up and pressed my lips against his shoulder, tasting the faint saltiness left by the water. The reaction was immediate. He exhaled, a sound that made the air around us feel charged, alive. His hand moved to cover mine, fingers lacing together for a moment before he turned fully to face me. There was no space left, and I could feel every inch of him pressed against me, solid and warm. My eyes flickered over him, tracing the path of water droplets still clinging to his chest, sliding down and catching in the hollows of muscle. Without thinking, I leaned in, pressing a kiss to the spot where his collarbone met his neck, tasting the warmth of him. He moved his hand to my waist, the grip firm but careful, and the feel of it sent a shiver racing down my spine. We were so close that the rise and fall of his chest pushed against me, every breath drawing us tighter together. The way his body reacted to my touch, the subtle shifts, the tightening of his grip, was enough to send my mind spinning. His hand slid up my back, fingers tracing along my spine, and I felt myself leaning into it, craving more. There was something about the way he touched me, confident but not rushed, like he was taking the time to memorize every detail, every reaction. My hands moved on their own, tracing the hard lines of his chest, feeling the heat that radiated from him. When our lips finally met, it was slow at first, testing the waters, but that initial hesitation melted away quickly. The taste of him was addictive, warm and inviting, and I couldn't get enough. His lips moved against mine with a mix of urgency and restraint that made my pulse race. I felt his hands tighten at my waist, pulling me even closer until there was no space left, no doubt, just the solid weight of him against me and the way it made every nerve in my body come alive. I could feel the heat between us building, the way the room seemed to disappear until all that was left was the sound of our breathing, the press of skin against skin. His lips moved to my jaw, trailing kisses down my neck, each one leaving a burning path that made my hands clench in response. The way he held me, strong and steady, was enough to make me feel safe and exhilarated at the same time. The world outside didn't exist, not in that moment. It was just us, tangled together, breathing the same air and lost in the pull of something neither of us wanted to stop. When it comes to describing what happened between us, it's tricky because it was such a mix of emotions, sensations, and surprises, all wrapped up in this experience that felt almost surreal. This was my first time with a black guy, and honestly, it was different from anything I'd known before. I wasn't expecting the connection to feel so intense, so raw, but it was unlike any other intimacy I'd shared. With Robert, there was this quiet confidence about him, a sense of control that wasn't overpowering, but still made me feel completely in the moment. It's hard to capture exactly what that was like, because it wasn't just about his presence or his touch, it was the entire experience that stood out and stayed with me. When things started, there was this moment where he leaned in close and he asked softly if I wanted to go further. Just hearing him say it, that close to my ear, felt like it ignited something. It was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. I felt this surge of anticipation, a nervous energy I hadn't experienced before, and it added to the moment in a way that made it even more meaningful. It wasn't something rushed or careless, it felt deliberate, like every move was chosen with intention. I think that's what made it all so much more impactful. There was this intensity in how he moved, how he held me, and how he navigated each step, respecting every reaction and allowing me to ease into the moment at my own pace. At first, I won't lie, it wasn't easy. He was built differently, and there was this moment where I had to adjust, and yeah, there was some discomfort. It's just part of the reality, I guess, especially when someone's bigger, and it takes a moment to get used to that. But honestly, that made it feel more real, like I was experiencing every second of it in a way I hadn't before. I think that's why it felt so intense, because I was completely aware of every movement, every change in how we were together. It wasn't just a routine, it felt real, like there was a lot more happening between us than just the physical stuff. Once we found our rhythm though, that initial discomfort faded and things shifted into this steady, easy connection. He wasn't rushing or trying to take over the moment, he was just there, steady, with this perfect balance of pressure and ease. I didn't have to worry about how things were going or second guess if I was in the right place. I could just be present, let him guide things, and trust he knew how to keep everything feeling right. His hands were strong, and that made it even better, like he knew exactly how to hold on without being rough. I could feel the intensity in the way he touched me, and that grounding strength brought me fully into the experience. Over time, things became just about enjoying each moment, not really thinking ahead or looking back. We settled into this flow that was steady and natural, and I felt totally comfortable letting go. It was like I didn't need to say anything or even think too much about what was happening. We were both just moving together, and it all felt right. With every movement, every shift, it was like we'd built this understanding, like we were both reading the situation without a word. Honestly, it wasn't just physical at that point. It was more like an unspoken connection, a shared experience that just felt effortless. All that initial awkwardness, the hesitation, it was gone. I didn't feel that anywhere. And maybe it was his approach, his way of being present, that made me feel like I could just let it all happen without overthinking. Each moment felt better than the last, and that steady rhythm, the strength in his touch, made everything feel satisfying in a way that wasn't rushed or forced. I won't lie, at first, there was a certain discomfort. He was different from anyone I'd been with before, and the physical part of it took a moment to adjust to. His build, his strength, it was more than what I was used to, and there was a kind of sharpness to it that made me pause. But in a strange way, that initial pain was part of what made it all so real. I could feel every movement, and while it was intense, it was also something that felt honest. I wasn't just swept along. I was fully present in every second, every sensation. It's something I hadn't felt before, that combination of hesitation and excitement. That night was intense in every way, and I still remember the details like it happened yesterday. Robert had this way of being close that felt overwhelming, but in a good way. When he leaned into me, pressing me back against the fabric of the bed, I felt every inch of his body holding me there. The firmness of his chest, the weight of his body, it was something I'd never really felt like that before. There was this natural strength in him, and feeling that up close brought out a side of me I didn't even know I had. As we got closer, he moved in and kissed me with a slow, deliberate intensity. I could hear his breathing, rough but controlled, close against my ear. The warmth of his breath sent this rush of excitement and nerves through me. It was grounding, hearing him that close, but it also made my pulse race in a way that wasn't exactly easy to describe. It was like every sound, every breath, became part of the moment, creating this rhythm between us that made everything feel even more charged. There was this point where he gripped me a little tighter, his hands firm but just gentle enough, holding me in place as if to say, "We're in this, just like this." His touch was strong but not rough, and he had a way of moving his hands that let me know he was fully present, feeling every reaction, noticing every small shift. Every touch and press brought us closer, and that closeness felt like this solid connection that went beyond just the physical. His strength was everywhere, in how he held onto me, in the way he leaned in closer, in each movement that felt controlled yet unrestrained. I felt his weight, felt the firmness in each touch, and it created this intensity that made the whole experience unforgettable. After everything, I found myself lying on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Robert's hand was running gently through my hair, this simple, reassuring gesture that just made everything feel so grounded and calm. The closeness, the warmth of his skin, and his strength beneath me, it was like I was discovering a new level of comfort, something I hadn't realized I was missing until that moment. I was lying there, letting it all sink in, and honestly, I was shocked at how fast everything had unfolded. It all felt so natural, like we'd fallen into this rhythm together without needing to think about it. And the way it had felt, better than anything I'd experienced before, was almost too much to process. I kept thinking, was that real? Because somehow it was everything I'd wanted, only better. And Robert was perfect, a guy who somehow managed to be intense yet gentle, grounded yet passionate. He was the kind of person I hadn't realized I was looking for until he was right there. If I could wish anything for others, it would be that everyone finds someone like him, someone who can make you feel seen and completely accepted all at once. As we lay there under the covers, I could feel this warmth radiating between us, a quiet understanding, a sense of peace. There was no rush to break the silence. It was comfortable, reassuring, just lying there together, no words needed. Robert's hand kept moving softly through my hair, this soothing touch that made me feel like I could stay there forever. And at that moment, he started asking me things in that gentle, curious way that made it easy to open up, like we were just talking about life, not what had just happened. It was almost surprising hearing him ask how I'd known he felt the same, how I'd been able to sense that he wanted the same thing but was just holding back. It was a strange thing to think about, how we'd both been wanting this, both waiting, but too unsure to make the first move. I told him how I'd noticed these small things, the way his eyes would linger just a little longer, or the way he'd look at me with this subtle hesitation, like he was waiting for a sign but wasn't sure if it was okay. I guess, deep down, I'd sensed it, felt this unspoken pull between us, but I'd been just as afraid as he was, worried about overstepping or ruining the friendship we built. After a long week of working non-stop, we hadn't even really talked. Both of us tend to get caught up in our own worlds, completely absorbed by work. It's just our nature, I guess. We're both workaholics, and it can make catching up tough. So, when Friday night finally rolled around, I was ready to unwind, and apparently he was too. Out of the blue, he showed up at my place, dressed up in that effortlessly stylish way of his, smelling incredible. You know that feeling when someone shows up looking like they're going out of their way to impress, but they're also just being themselves? That's what it felt like. He looked good, and the night was already shaping up to be different. He invited me out to a bar nearby, and honestly, that was exactly what I needed after a week like this. We went out, and from the start, there was this energy between us, this kind of comfort and ease. It was like all the stress of the week just melted away. The bar had this relaxed vibe, not too loud, and we found a spot where we could settle in. We started with a couple of beers, just talking and catching up, letting the conversation flow wherever it wanted to go. After a while, we both kind of loosened up. It was just one of those nights where it felt like you could really be yourself, no holding back. After a few rounds, it was clear we were both feeling good, more open, laughing a little too loudly, not caring about anything else. The night just kept getting better, and I started to notice this change in the way we were around each other. It wasn't just friendly, it was something different, something that felt like it had been there under the surface all along, but we'd both been too focused on our own lives to really notice. At some point, after another beer or two, things felt electric. I think we both knew there was something else going on, something unspoken. He leaned in close, and I could feel his presence even more. There's a moment in situations like this where you realize the direction things are headed, but it's almost too late to turn back, and honestly, neither of us wanted to. Everything felt like it was happening naturally, like we were following some invisible line that had led us here. The bar, the music, the energy, it all just faded into the background. After another drink, he whispered that I should come with him. It was spontaneous, and I was already in that mood where anything felt possible. We ended up slipping away, finding a moment alone, and it was like the rest of the world just disappeared. I was shocked, honestly, surprised at myself, surprised at him, at how quickly everything shifted from casual to something way more intense. And more important, right in the bar toilet. Yes, you got it right. He did it to me right there. When we finally left, I suggested we grab a taxi and head back to his place. At that point, I felt like there was no stopping this momentum, and the night was only beginning. The ride was quiet but charged. There wasn't much talking, but there didn't need to be. We got to his place, and as soon as we stepped inside, it was like we both knew where things were headed. I took the lead. As soon as the door closed, I gently pushed him back against the wall. I could see that little grin on his face, like he was amused but also surprised. Clearly, he wasn't expecting me to take over like that. The spontaneity of the moment just clicked. It was like flipping a switch and everything just flowed naturally from there. I could feel his breath, the warmth between us, and somehow it all felt even more real, more vivid. Being in charge this time was new, and he seemed to genuinely enjoy it, following my lead without hesitation. There was an unspoken trust between us, a sense of mutual respect that made it feel comfortable yet intense. As we moved further into the room, we never lost that connection, like there was this natural rhythm guiding everything. We ended up on the couch, where things unfolded at a slower, more deliberate pace. This wasn't some rushed moment, it was us taking our time, appreciating each other's presence without any need to hurry. Everything felt grounded, safe, and it made the entire experience feel more significant. There was an ease to how we were together, something genuine that didn't require overthinking or second-guessing. Throughout, he let me take charge, which felt like this shift from our usual dynamic. I was more aware of everything of him, of the atmosphere in the room, and it felt good to explore that side of things, to be able to show up in a way that was both confident and fully present. He was attentive, responding to my every move, and it was clear that we were both exactly where we wanted to be. The next morning had that soft, quiet feeling you get after a long night. I woke up feeling more relaxed than I had in a while, with memories from last night playing back in my mind. As I stretched and opened my eyes, I noticed he was still there beside me, relaxed and breathing steadily, completely at ease. It was nice waking up with him there, a reminder of how different and intense everything had felt between us. Eventually, he stirred too, stretching out and letting out a deep breath. We shared a quick smile, and without really saying anything, I motioned toward the bathroom. It felt natural, like he belonged here, and I didn't mind the idea of a morning shower to get us both refreshed. We made our way to the bathroom, and as we stepped inside, the space filled with the warmth of the running water. The steam started to fog up the glass, and everything felt relaxed and quiet, just the sound of water and us getting under it together. Standing under the warm spray with him beside me felt strangely close, more intimate than I'd expected. There wasn't any awkwardness, we just moved easily, washing away the night and getting lost in the heat of the water and each other. The water rolled over our shoulders, and there was something calming about it, as if it was setting the tone for this relaxed, easy morning. Our eyes met a few times, and the connection felt real, almost like a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had happened. Without thinking too much about it, I reached over, brushing my hands along his arms, feeling the warmth of his skin under my touch. He responded by stepping in a bit closer, and for a moment, we were just there together, taking in the feel of being this close without needing any words. It was natural to lean in for a kiss, and under the shower's heat, the kiss felt softer, more unhurried than last night. The water added this gentle rhythm as we got wrapped up in each other again, his hands moving up along my back as I reached around him, feeling the solidness of his frame. The steam made everything hazy, but that only added to the feeling, the sensation of being wrapped up in something private and personal. As we kept kissing, my hands moved along his chest and shoulders, tracing the lines of his muscles, still feeling that spark from last night. His skin was warm from the water, and the feeling of touching him like this was grounding. I felt his hands on my back, and he started to pull me closer, letting the warmth build between us all over again. There was something about the closeness that felt deeper, more relaxed now, as if we'd already crossed a line, and this was just the natural continuation of it. We took turns helping each other with the soap, hands slipping over shoulders and down backs, and it was a mix of laughter and just soaking up each other's presence. There was no rush. We were just enjoying being together in that quiet, steamy space. At one point, I found myself leaning against him, feeling his solid frame holding me up as we stood under the water, letting the warmth and closeness sink in. Eventually, we finished up, rinsing off and stepping out, grabbing towels. It was simple, relaxed, and as we dried off, there was an unspoken comfort between us. As the water continued to pour over us, the warmth only added to the intensity of the moment. Standing there, I felt the pull to be even closer. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him tightly against me, feeling the strength in his body soften as he leaned into my touch. It was a rare moment where everything felt perfectly in sync, the barriers were down, and we were just two people completely present with each other. There was a quiet power in how he responded, the way he let himself relax against my shoulder, breathing deeply as if he was soaking up the comfort of the moment. It wasn't rushed or chaotic, it was intense in a way that felt grounding and deep. I could feel the subtle shift as he melted into the embrace, the tension from the night before easing into something gentler and more trusting. The contact between us was solid, real, and it hit differently than any casual closeness I'd known. It was like he found something safe in the way I held him, and that realization only made the moment more powerful. My hands moved up and down his back, feeling the warmth of his skin and the steady rhythm of his breathing. The water mixed with our closeness, making everything feel like it was wrapped in heat and connection. I realized that while last night had been intense and we're still together, and things have grown in ways I didn't expect. It's been a few months since that first night and morning, and each day has been about discovering more about each other. We've fallen into a rhythm that feels easy, natural, and there's something really comforting about knowing he's there. It's not just the big gestures, it's the little things, like the way he'll shoot me a quick smile when we're watching TV, or how he always reaches for my hand without thinking. I wanted to tell you about one particular day that stood out. It was a Saturday, and we decided to get out of the city for a bit. There's a nature reserve not too far from where we live, with winding trails that lead to a clearing by a lake. We packed up a couple of sandwiches, water bottles, and a blanket, deciding to make a day of it. The drive out there was full of easy chatter and the kind of silence that feels comfortable. He leaned back in the passenger seat, eyes half closed as we cruised along, the sun casting shadows across his face. When we got to the trail, it was early enough that the air still had that crisp, fresh feeling. We started the walk, joking around and bumping into each other as we navigated the path. He'd occasionally reach over to pull me into a side hug just because, and each time he did, it made my chest feel warm. The trail eventually opened up to the clearing, and we laid out the blanket under the shade of a big tree, looking out over the calm water. Sitting there, we talked about everything and nothing. He told me stories from his childhood, things he hadn't shared before, and I found myself caught up in the way he spoke, the expressions on his face, the way his eyes would light up at certain memories. It made me realize just how much I'd come to care about him, not just for the moments we shared, but for who he was when he thought no one was watching. As the afternoon wore on, the sun started to dip lower, casting the lake in golds and pinks. We leaned back against the tree, and he shifted, pressing his side against mine. There was something about the quiet, the way the breeze carried the scent of the water, that made the moment feel charged. Without thinking too much about it, I turned to him and he met my eyes, that familiar smile spreading slowly across his face. I reached out, brushing my fingers over his arm, and he leaned into the touch, letting his head rest on my shoulder. It was the kind of closeness that felt easy, like it had always been there. The warmth of his skin under my hand, the steady rise and fall of his breathing, it was all so simple, but it carried weight. He shifted slightly, turning so he could wrap his arms around me, and we stayed like that, wrapped up in each other while the day faded around us. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of everything we didn't need to say out loud. I felt his breath warm against my neck and the slight press of his fingertips as he held me. It was reassuring, grounding, and I let myself sink into it, feeling that mix of comfort and excitement that only comes from being with someone who just gets you. The world around us blurred, leaving just the feeling of him against me and the shared quiet. Eventually, as the last bits of daylight started to slip away, we pulled back slightly but stayed close, faces just a few inches apart. There was a softness in his eyes that mirrored what I was feeling, and we kissed, slow and unhurried, like we had all the time in the world. It wasn't about anything more than just being there, in that moment, taking in everything that had brought us here. When the sky turned a deep blue and the first stars started to appear, we packed up and walked back to the car, the path now dimly lit by the moon. His hand found mine as we walked, fingers lacing together, and we didn't need to say anything. The drive back was quieter, with music playing low in the background and his hand resting on my leg, a small gesture that felt significant. That night, when we got back to my place, we didn't rush inside. We stood in the driveway for a minute, the city lights flickering in the distance, and he pulled me into a hug that felt like home. It was one of those moments that made me realize how much I'd come to love him, how being with him felt right in a way that was both new and familiar. And I wanted him. We kept kissing, and before long, we were both standing up. He grabbed my hand, and we moved toward the bedroom. It wasn't like we were rushing, but the tension had built up between us, and it felt natural to take the next step. We got to the bed, and as soon as we were there, it was like everything just clicked into place. He sat down first, and I climbed onto the bed beside him. There was no awkwardness, just us together. We kissed again, this time more intense, with the same slow build-up. I let my hand slide over his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin and the muscles beneath. He was solid, and it made me feel grounded in a way I hadn't felt in a while. We kept moving together, both of us taking our time, letting the night unfold without any rush. I could feel how his hands explored my body, not aggressively, but with a steady, careful touch. It was like he was paying attention to every part of me, and that made me want to return the favor. I ran my hands over his back, feeling the firmness of his muscles, the way he tensed and relaxed under my touch. It was all about the connection, not just the physical part of it, but the way we fit together, how natural it felt. Eventually, we ended up in a position where we were facing each other, bodies pressed together, and the closeness felt almost overwhelming in the best way. We kissed again, slow and deep, letting everything else melt away. I was lost in the way he held me, how his hands moved over my skin, how his lips never stopped kissing me, even when we paused to catch our breath. The whole night had this intensity to it, but it wasn't forced or rushed. It was like everything was unfolding just how it should, naturally and without any pressure. We were so in tune with each other, and every small touch felt amplified because of it. By the time we both finally settled, lying next to each other, it wasn't just the physical closeness that felt good. It was the quiet, the comfort, and the ease with which we could just be. I didn't need to say anything. Neither of us did. We just lay there, the room still, with his arm wrapped around me, both of us content in the space we shared. Thank you for your attention, my gay lovers. Love each other and see you tomorrow.